Say what you want about 2017, it wasn't uneventful. It seemed like every other week we were getting news stories regarding something going on that was distinct from the previous week's big headline grabber, and regardless to the quality of the world as a whole, 2017 was actually a pretty great year for video games. As a product. In terms of business, the latter part of the year can be accurately summed up in Call of Duty World War II, but the games themselves were actually pretty good as a whole. We got a wide variety of excellent games, older games got some needed support. In fact, it's been a good year to the point that I can't put together a worst of 2017 list without it coming across as a list of easy targets. I thought Star Wars Battlefront 2 was at least competent, regardless of the controversy. Mass Effect Andromeda just bored me, which might make it the worst game of the year by default. I actually enjoyed the ukulele local multiplayer, unironically. I never really liked Life is Strange enough to care about its sequel. I had to look up several YouTube videos just so I could get a grasp on the bad games that came out this year, because nothing really stood out to me, like The Order 1886, Godzilla, or Depression Quest. Life of Black Tiger? Yeah, let's call this one my worst game of 2017, and if you want to know why, take a look at this screenshot of the game. Moving on, I think 2017 has been a pretty damn good year, regardless of what kind of games you enjoy. There was something coming out every month that was great, or at least interesting, and say what you want about the publishers pulling out their worst elements of the year, but at least we have great games to fill that void. Instead of doing my usual top 10 countdown, I thought it would be better if I simply listed games I highly recommend before telling you my game of the year, for the reason that I had a very difficult time ranking them because the games really were that good. Also, like last year, there's going to be a few glaring omissions compared to your own lists, like anything made by Nintendo, Neo, or Hellblade. If that is unsatisfying to you, feel free to tweet me your opinion at CoreIdeas. But before I get to my list, I want to make an honourable mention to a game released in 2015, Rainbow Six Siege. If you told me Rainbow Six Siege would be my most played game of 2017, I would have laughed you out of the room. The mixed reception and my first personal impressions didn't really impress me, but this year was when Siege really came out of its shell. This game is a masterclass of tactics and unpredictability, with each class adding or negating another class's ability, and the destruction physics lends itself to creative and satisfying moments. At the time of writing, Siege is the number 5 most currently played game on Steam, and if Ubisoft continue supporting the game as they have done, then year 3 is looking extremely promising. While I do fear that the confusing monetization systems and the awful starter edition will make a lot of people uneasy, I am still optimistic for this game's future. It's given me joyous moments alongside my friends, and its continued development still shocks me. In a good way. Right, on to the games that did come out in 2017. Horizon Zero Dawn. The big surprise of Horizon Zero Dawn wasn't the characters and story. In fact, I found them both to be largely unengaging and actually quite dull. What I did fall in love with was the world building and the gameplay, both of which are magnificent. It's the most novel concept I've seen this year, and exploring this crumbling and lost world of centuries past was something I indulged in for hours at a time. The gameplay itself is satisfying despite a few hiccups, and just writing this has tempted me to go back and give the story another chance. If I don't get engaged, there's always the excellent gameplay to experience again. Hollow Knight. I am a big sucker for Metroidvania, more specifically the Castlevania Symphony of the Night kind of game, and over the years we've seen homages to that series through level design. The difference between Hollow Knight and Salt and Sanctuary is that Hollow Knight feels like a vastly improved Symphony of the Night rather than a 2D Dark Souls clone. And speaking of, the oppressive nature of the world, combined with a magic system that doesn't feel phoned in, makes this one of the most derivative games I've played this year, yet also possibly the most refined and polished game I've played this year. If you are a big fan of the 2D Metroidvania games or Igavania games, I highly recommend you pick up this love letter to the entire genre. Prey. Arcane Studios are alright. I thought Dishonored was a good series of games, but for reasons I find really difficult to explain, they didn't click with me. They're not bad games, but I can't really shower it with praise that a lot of other players have done. Prey is the game that's made me consider giving Dishonored another go, because this homage to classic looking glass game design has to be one of my favourite gaming experiences in years. Amazing attention to detail in level and environmental design, dynamic uncertainty that comes with the most common enemy, and a masterful soundtrack by Mick Gordon. Comparisons to System Shock and BioShock are inevitable, but personally I think this game is destined to be the next Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It didn't review well, it didn't sell well, but I think appreciation for this game will be fully realised after a few years to look back upon it. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Despite the hoopla I made of Dark Souls and Metroidvania earlier, horror is actually my favourite genre in the medium. I hold Silent Hill 2 in high regard, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of my most played games on Steam, and Soma is the most unnerving game I have ever played. My 2013 Game of the Year would be Outlast in a year that had BioShock Infinite, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Papers, Please. Outlast 2 wasn't very good, but Resident Evil 7 knocked it out of the park, which more than makes up for it. It's a fantastic horror game that includes some of the sillier aspects of the franchise, yet it makes them genuinely unnerving. And the first-person aspect was a welcome addition that I was originally nervous about. The two-path choices towards the end was perhaps a misguided inclusion, but the overall package makes it the best horror game to come out this year by far. Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. I'm not going to say too much because I am working on a video about this game and the New Order, but I will say this. It is a tad weaker than the New Order, but that's still only a tad weaker than one of the very few games I would give a solid 5 stars to. A good game, botched stealth aside, and yes, Mick Gordon did a fantastic job on the soundtrack. He's arguably Bethesda Publishing's most valuable player. Cuphead. I've not been able to get into Contra. I've tried a few times, but it's one of those classic games that's so old and the industry has advanced so much that it hasn't really clicked for me. Contra is far from being the only game that has an admittedly me-shaped problem when reviewing it, but it's nice to see new games modernise the feel of classic games while updating the right elements so it doesn't feel too dated. Prey did this, and so did Cuphead, a wonderful fast-paced game that's just the right length so it doesn't get too frustrating, while having a wide variety of environments and enemies to keep it refreshing. And that's not even getting into the game's main selling point. I was worried that the fantastic visuals would be the only thing the game would have going for it, but those worries are thoroughly quashed. It's satisfying to see, hear, and play. Night in the Woods. I'm still trying to figure out why people are praising the original Life is Strange so much when Night in the Woods tackles the main inspiration so much better. It looks better, it's better written, and with more, ironically, human characters, and the concept doesn't feel too contrived to the points that the gameplay contradicts the story. I really liked Night in the Woods. It's possibly the second best written game to come out this year, and as far as walking simulator-like games go, this is one of the very few that does the genre justice, and can go alongside Colat, Firewatch, and The Stanley Parable as one of the best examples of games that are light on gameplay. Tekken 7. Okay, time for a gameplay-heavy story-light experience, which is weird for a game that tries to take its own story seriously. Did you know that there's 2 animated movies based on the lore of Tekken, and 2 more movies called Tekken that have next to nothing to do with the story of Tekken? Newsflash! The story is bad, but Christ, the fighting in this game is excellent. It's been a while since I've dived this deep into a fighting game. Funnily enough, my main is Lucky Chloe at the moment, which means the game doesn't fall into the trap by making it too complex for newer players, and the online double elimination tournament was more fun than it had any right to be. I don't play fighting games much, if at all, and I found Tekken 7 to be thoroughly challenging and entertaining. Pyre. It's not the best Supergiant game, but it more than holds up against the two mammoths that are Bastion and Transistor. The key thing to enjoy in Pyre is the knowledge that you're playing a visual novel sports game, and that the story is not about the situation you are in. It's about the relationships each character has with each other, and the responses they have towards us. I wasn't expecting to be so into a sports game, much less a made-up sports game since Rocket League, and the downtime was something I really relished. I was thoroughly engaged throughout, and surprisingly, the hyperlinked text didn't derail the flow of the game. They were brief and to the point, allowing the character dialogue to do the building. Surprisingly, they added in multiplayer, which they didn't have to do, but they did it well. And the music and art are amazing as usual, but Supergiant Games doesn't get points for that anymore. Nier Automata. My game of the year. It was a welcome surprise and a satisfying relief. I was getting extremely worried about Platinum Games due to a number of things. 2016 was their worst year in terms of quality, thanks to the two Star Fox games and that god-awful Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. And less than a week into 2017, Hideki Kamiya's game got canned by Microsoft, combined with the mixed reception Yoko Taro gets, and I had every reason to be worried. And thank Christ for Nier, my worries have been laid to rest. Nier Automata is a game that's so great, so impactful, so deep in its narrative construct, that for the past year I have scrapped at least 7 scripts about the game. Not that the game is hard to describe in what it does right, with my personal favourite being how the story is self-aware in that it's a video game, going so far as to add new context to tired tropes, but my difficulty in describing it lies beyond a brief summary I am recording here. The world is wacky, action-packed, and cruel, asking questions about what game mechanics represent, while delivering the same mechanics with the familiar polish Platinum are known for. I have never played a Nier game, nor have I read into the series, and the fact that one of my favourite parts of the game was when I was reading what each character was saying says a lot. Turns out what Yoko Taro needed to make this game successful and not feel half-baked was an accomplished developer who could deliver the over-the-top mechanics that add to the game's message. To put it in better perspective, Yoko Taro's last directed game was Drakengard 3, and it was developed by the Deadly Premonition guys, and released the same year. Nier Automata is not only my favourite game of the year, and personally the best game of the year, but it might actually be my favourite and what I consider to be the best game developed, period. I'll have to play it a few more times to ultimately decide if so, but it is most certainly in my top 10. If you love video games and video game narratives, it is your duty to play this game. Just be wary of the PC version. There's stories of poor optimization going around since its release, which, even with all my praise, shouldn't be ignored. So that's my games of 2017, and I just want to say that despite the negativity towards the industry, there is still cause to be optimistic. 2018 is promising to deliver Metro Exodus, Bloodstained, Ni no Kuni 2, and Dynasty Warriors 9. And with the way Ubisoft is going in terms of post-launch product, there's a sliver of hope that other publishers can improve. But I'm not going to hold my breath. For now, I'm going to continue making videos of subjects and games I like, some games I dislike, and maybe get started on the Beyond Two Souls subject I've condemned myself to. Thank you for watching me this past year, through my ups and downs, and I hope I can deliver and improve videos for you this year too. Happy New Year, everyone.